Hey, this is Drew Dixon, co-host of this podcast and the chief content nerd at Love Thy Nerd. I just want to give you a heads up about what you're about to listen to. Humans of Gaming evolved out of another podcast I did several years ago that I started several years ago with a friend of mine named Richard Clark. And so we did about 100 interviews with various game designers, and some of them are really great, and I would hate for you not to hear them. So that's what this is. You're going to hear an old interview that Richard and I did with Edmund McMillen of The Binding of Isaac and Super Meat Boy and several other games. He was also in Indie Game the Movie. He's featured heavily in that movie, and so if you're interested in kind of learning a little bit about the early days of indie game development and kind of how that became a big deal, Edmund McMillen's at the very center of that, I think. And that documentary focuses on that, so it's really interesting. It would be worth checking out. But yeah, you won't hear from Chris Waltney in this episode, but we'll be back with a regularly scheduled episode of Humans of Gaming next week. But for now, I hope you really enjoy this fascinating interview with Edmund McMillen, who gets into kind of some of the spiritual influences and his background that plays into why The Binding of Isaac even exists. So I hope you find it as interesting as I thought it was. And again, we'll see you next week for a regular episode. Until then, enjoy.
This is the Humans of Gaming podcast, an open and honest conversation about games, life, and belief.
I'm your host, Drew Dixon, and I'm here with Richard Clark, our managing editor. Hey, Rich.
Hey, I'm your managing editor, Richard
Good.
Clark.
You doing all right today?
I'm doing quite well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Well, every week we invite a special guest on the podcast to talk with us about life, games, and belief. And this week we have a guest that I'm really excited about because I'm pretty obsessed with one of the games that he made. We have Edmund McMillen, who you might know from The Binding of Isaac and Super Meat Boy and a lot of other games too. So, hey, Edmund, how are you?
I'm all right.
And you've made a lot of like smaller games too. What else besides The Binding of Isaac and Super Meat Boy might people know you from?
Those are the things people know me from. I've made a lot of people will play my games, and then if they become so obsessed that they need to see everything that I've done, they'll go and dig up my games previous to.
Yeah.
But yeah, the best of the games that I made before those two would be Ether and Timefuck. Those are or maybe Spewer too. Those are like the last three games I think I made before I made Super Meat Boy.
Okay. Cool.
And before that, I've got like 20 games out there floating around in the Flash space. I put most of them in a pack of games on Steam called the Basement Collection.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Which is worth checking out. I mean, there's some good stuff on there, and I spent a lot of time updating some of the old stuff.
I have the Basement Collection. I've played a little bit of it. I like it a lot because it feels like it's like this rare moment where you get to kind of take in one person's work in sort of one fell swoop, which is really nice, and get kind of a sense of who you are as a person from those games, which you don't get a chance to do all the time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a good way to kind of sum it up. I mean, it's kind of what I was going for too. Like one of the reasons why I made that collection was because of the movie. And when the movie came out, everybody's like, "You made this one game," and I'm like, "No." Like, and I kind of wanted to like squish that kind of the illusion of that I just fell out of the sky with a game.
Yeah. So by the movie, you mean Indie Game, the movie.
Yeah. Indie Game. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was an interesting film because I guess it would just kind of presented you as like a guy who made Super Meat Boy.
They did talk a lot about my history, but a lot of people just glaze over that. You'd be surprised how many people, there was a whole segment about the stuff that I had made before Super Meat Boy and how I kind of got my start. Like there was 10 years before Super Meat Boy where I was making games and just having fun with it, but not really making any money. And then it was kind of my attempt at, okay, let's try to make this a career and got to make money. So
you never did anything in the AAA space?
No. I avoided working in that space because I never felt comfortable. Like, I had a lot of fears working, like making art for a living, period.
Yeah.
I was worried that I would grow to hate it, and it was kind of my one outlet, so it was a pretty scary thing for me to even attempt it. I was kind of... There's also the, what if I suck question.
Yeah.
And I kind of just wanted to do my own stuff. I have a really hard time working for people. I'm just not good when it comes to creativity. Like, I'm the kind of guy who, in school, would... If I was in a team situation, I was the ball hog. I'd be the guy who's like, fuck it, I'll do it. I'll do all the work. Just let me do it. Like, you guys aren't as into it as I am, so just give it to me.
Yeah.
I'll make this my own. And that, I knew that I could never work in an environment like that. I'm just not, I don't have that kind of skill set.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I think some people have this perception of, like, not wanting to work in that space because of, like, it being kind of, like, oppressive creatively or even, like, oppressive, like, to your life. You know what I mean? Like, just the crunch and all those kinds of things. But you're clearly a person, it seems like to me, who is not afraid of crunch. If I took anything away from, like, Indie Game the Movie, it's that you and Tommy, like, you guys work freaking hard.
Yeah, I would agree. I would even say that, like, being an independent developer and finding any amount of success in doing so is way more oppressive than working a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah.
Way more. Like, it's and it's something that I'm kind of dealing with right now after 5 years of kind of getting lost into this, vacuum of in quote success, that I've completely neglected everything else. And I'm kind of like picking up the pieces and trying to figure out where I should be and what I want and all that sort of stuff too. It's too easy to lose yourself in obsessive working. I'm a workaholic, and it's an addiction like anything else, and it has negative effects.
Mm-hmm. You said earlier,
you kind of have to do that in order to find success. Like, there's always pros and cons, and people used to always ask me that, like, well, what's the difference working, at a company and working independently? Like, what should I do? And it's like, well, usually if you're asking me this question, your answer is already there. Like, you should work at a company. Because if not, you probably would already be independent in making stuff. But it's a risk-reward situation, like any designer knows. Like, risk-reward is important in games, and it's important in life. And if you're willing to take the risk, there's the reward. But there's a lot of risk, a great deal of risk. Even with finding success, there's still so much risk involved.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that one of the reasons you were hesitant to, like, jump fully into making games initially was that you were a little bit scared of, like, the idea of making art. Could you explain what you meant by that?
I grew up making independent comics. I was always doing my own stuff, like making up my own weird things that I obsessed over that nobody else really cared about, but I was pretty into. And I kind of got to this point where I went to college for like a few weeks, art college, and I felt really, really lost and really like I just didn't fit in anywhere and I didn't know what I was doing. And all I knew is that I just wanted to make my stuff. I wanted to make my stuff, and I didn't know what that meant, like how I was going to be able to do it myself, because I knew that if I worked for somebody else that I would probably be too drained to work on my own stuff, and I was also a little too scared to try it by myself. Actually make an attempt. It was never like, the stuff that I was working with was always a bit too weird to make any kind of money, or get a publisher or anything like that. It was always just too much. And in a lot of ways, I think I was playing it safe in that respect, where I didn't have to deal with failure as much if I didn't try. And I tried, and I failed. I remember, with my comics, I sent my comics out to get published, and I failed. And it was so hard.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the things that like kind of shut me off initially. But it was a motivator too, because that initial, no, which wasn't as harsh as I read it, but it pushed me in another direction where it's like, oh, wait, well, screw these people. I'll do it myself. I'll find my own user base. I'll find people out there. I'm going to learn, and I'm going to teach myself how to make a website. And I'm going to, instead of instead of publishing these zines, locally, I'm gonna put all my stuff online because that's what I hear people are doing now. So I'm gonna learn how to do that, and that's what I did. And then that transitioned into like using Flash and basic interaction, like basic interactive Flash games. And then I started talking with other people who were actually doing scripting and stuff like that, and I started working with those people, and it turned into games. It was just like this kind of like odd progression, but I felt like I was kind of just shot in one general direction, but I was always really, really petrified of doing it for a living.
Yeah.
I always just worked, I worked at GameStop, worked in factories, I just worked, little shitty jobs to make money, but then when I got home, I would work on my art, and I think it wasn't until like the early 2000s when I said, okay, well, I'd lost my job. I was an animal control officer, and I lost my job. And
animal control officer?
Yeah.
So you were like going to houses and getting snakes out of people's houses and stuff?
Yeah. That was the more fun part of the job. I was kind of the leading boy, so I was the one who would go and so like if a skunk would get his head caught in like a yogurt container, I'd be the guy that throws the towel over the skunk, wraps it up, pops the thing off its head, and then lets it go.
Did you ever get
or I'd be scraping up deads. For the most part, I'd be scraping deads off of the street.
Yeah.
Like I was that person, which
that sounds gross.
It was yeah, but to me it was really interesting. Like I can't say that I didn't enjoy a lot of the aspects of how horrible that was. Because it was interesting. There's a whole, you could see it in Isaac, really. There's a whole decomposer ecosystem going on there was pretty interesting. And in a lot of ways, you'd see these corpses, bloom and flower. It was bizarrely beautiful.
Wow.
So it was a big chunk of my life, and I thought that this was what I was going to be. And it's a whole long story, but I lost my job there. They fired me, and when I got fired, I was so taken back. I was like, "What am I supposed to do? Like, I can't. I'm never going to get another job that has that kind of security." Like, it was almost like a cop. Like, I was getting paid pretty well, and I really liked the job, and I was good at it, and didn't know what to do. And I said, "Okay, screw it. I'm going to try. I'm going to try to use my talent, and make money with it." And I started to try to like get jobs, places, and stuff like that. It was really scary though. The initial like, okay, I'm going to try, because I was so scared that all these people would just say you suck, or I wasn't going to be able to make it as an artist. But I was actually able to find a few freelance jobs that turned into semi part-time work, but enough to pay the bills. I was doing magazine covers and logos and mascots.
You were applying to do like artwork for these. Yeah, okay, cool.
And I was
so at this point you're not really like doing any kind of game design. Right?
Well, I was.
Oh, okay.
I said I was doing that as well, but back then you couldn't make money off of it at all.
Because there wasn't really an indie scene, I guess.
No, it was. I was finally introduced in 2004 or like mid 2003 to the indie scene. When I started working with this company called Chronic Logic, who was an indie company that kind of introduced me to the whole thing. But I was actually making indie games before that. I was making really weird games in like the late 90s, like 1999, 2000, 2001. I was making all these weird interactive games. One of them was called Dead Baby Dress Up, which was my claim to fame back then. Which is actually where the blue baby comes from. That was my mascot. That is the dead baby from my old work.
Okay.
He was always kind of my mascot, and that turned into this weird series of games called Badlands, which was, I think there was 3 games that I made with a friend of mine, Calder, and then I made this game Gish with this company, and it ended up getting into the finals of this thing called the IGF, which was like a big. It wasn't that big then. It was an award ceremony. It was like maybe 20 people, 30 people, at the most 50 people were entering back then from all over the world, and
wow.
Annually, everybody would gather together and meet each other, and that was my introduction to that whole environment, which you still couldn't make much money off of. Like, I tell people now, like, Gish, which back then in 2004, when it actually released, it was considered a huge success, huge. And I think it's from 2004 until it got on Steam, I think we had sold like less than, I can't even remember, like 40,000 copies or something like that.
Wow.
And it's like really small. I can't even remember how small it was. I want to say like 10,000 copies before Steam actually hit, and it was considered a success.
At the time, I'm sure you thought that's amazing.
But that's that was in the span of like 8 years from the time it got on Steam. Like we were selling it off of our website. I remember one day we had 98 sales in a day because we got linked on Penny Arcade in 2004. And that was the hugest, oh my god, that was the biggest thing ever. Of course, no other day came close to 98 sales in a day. And it's like, nowadays, Super Meat Boy or Isaac gets a sale on Steam and we sell 140,000 copies. It's a way, way, way different playing field. Strangely enough, indie games were $20 or $30 back then. You charged more for them. It was a different playing field. But there were no portals. You just sold your stuff on your website, and you just crossed your fingers.
Yeah. Well,
but I didn't make enough to make a living off my games. I didn't make enough to make a living off of just my games until months before I started working on Super Meat Boy. Yeah. It was like at the very end where I was finally like, okay, I'm basically self-sufficient now with these sponsorships. I've got enough money that I can work on this game for a year or two. And then I'm going to put everything on it and then cross my fingers and hope that it's going to work out.
Yeah.
But it took about 8.5, 9 years to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I do want to make sure we switch gears and talk about kind of your spiritual background. So tell me a little bit about like how you grew up and whether or not religion was a part of your upbringing.
I grew up. So my mom's side of the family, they're all Catholic. My grandma was Hispanic, so she's kind of like a Mexican Catholic. All of my memories of what was in her room, all the saints that she had set up, and all the prayers that she did, and everything were very, very vivid and very comforting. Yeah. My dad's side of the family they're all born again Christian, pretty extreme. A lot of them are missionaries. One of them, I think, lived in the Fiji Islands and converted people there and did missionary work there. A lot of that sort of stuff too. Mm-hmm. A lot of the dogma I experienced as a kid came from that side of the family. My mom and dad split up when I was 5, which surprisingly wasn't that big of a deal for me. I didn't really feel that close to my dad ever. Don't know why. But, I can't say I felt that close to my mom either. I felt very close to my grandma. She was the kind of my closest person, the person I always felt comfortable with. And there was never any dogma on her end at all. She was a very, very progressive, very just good, forgiving, and realistic and honest woman. Had very progressive views overall, and I never heard her say anything, she never condemned anybody. I all the stuff that I heard from the McMillen side of the family, my dad's side of the family, it's like these two religions, which are at their core, they're very similar. They're the same religion, but two very, very different sides. And that was kind of my experience growing up. But like religious imagery was surrounding me wherever I went.
Yeah,
it was always there, and I went through 7 years of catechism growing up.
In the Catholic Church?
In the Catholic Church.
Okay.
I wasn't confirmed. That's when I told my mom that I'm not sure I believe in it. So I felt guilty about going. I felt a lot of Catholic guilt.
Yeah. So how old would you have been when you decided not to be confirmed?
How old was I?
Yeah.
I want to say I was 15, probably maybe 14.
Okay.
Maybe 13. It's very hard for me to remember. I remember where I was. I was in the Burger King drive-thru. I tell my mom, I'm not too sure. I don't know if I believe in God, and I feel like it's kind of a slap in the face for me to go to church and take communion when I'm not sure I believe any of the things that are going on there. And
yeah,
she was a little upset, but
Do you remember about the process of how you got to the point where you kind of were ready to say, to where it was such an issue for you that you wanted, to make clear to your mom that you didn't want to be confirmed? What was that process like?
I want to say that I don't think I ever believed that it was real.
To begin with.
Yeah. I from as young as I can remember, I feel like it didn't ever make logical sense. Even the things like when I would pray the rosary and stuff like that, I felt like it was a very comforting thing, but I didn't really feel like there was really anybody there. I would have, and maybe even still to this day at times, I take more comfort in praying to loved ones that have passed and speaking to them in prayer than I do with praying to anybody in particular that I don't know.
So is that something you still do? You like pray to?
I have. I've definitely talked to my grandma quite a few times when things are hard, and yeah, for sure.
So where do you feel like you've landed now? Like if you were, some people don't or eschew labels or whatever, but if you were to label yourself, kind of where you are, like spiritually in terms of religion, that sort of thing, like where are you at now?
I don't know, and I don't think I ever will. I guess that makes me agnostic. If you need to put a label on it.
Sure.
Writing agnostic down here.
But yeah, I don't know, and I think that's the big and very honest response, the most honest response that I can give without sounding arrogant or confident in any way that I know something that I know nobody does. I don't know. There are things I know I don't believe, like I don't believe in the biblical God.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense to me. But the big question, and the thing that I think defines me spiritually, is that I don't know what happens when I die. Definitely not. And I think it goes beyond just not like an ascension or descension situation, but more into the unknown of like beyond consciousness, beyond what we could ever understand could exist. And I think that's an important thing. And I feel like that's something that I've definitely thought a lot about, was realistically the idea of a God or the idea of an afterlife is not something that our brains can fathom in any way, much like, things in other galaxies existing and what they might look like. Like, we know we're limited to the things that we know, which is why I think a lot of people put a human face on a god or any kind of deities. They always look human in some way, shape, or form, because we're limited to what we know and what we can experience. And I feel like these unknown things go beyond our understanding, and I don't think they can realistically be grasped. Which is why I think that the mystery of where we go when we die, and if there's someone looking down on us, is such a vast and common thing in every single culture, is because we just simply don't know, and it's the unanswered question that makes people so obsessed to, put stories to these things.
Yeah.
And comfort, put some comfort in this unknown.
Does that unknown nature, like the fact that you're acknowledging, okay, I can't possibly know that, does that cause you to be more afraid of death?
No. I can't say that I'm afraid of death. I'm definitely afraid of others dying and me having to deal with it.
Yeah, yeah.
That is a much more horrible thing for me to fathom, because I know that when I die, I will no longer think in the way I'm thinking now. If I'm thinking at all.
Right.
I won't exist in anything that I can fathom. So I try my best not to worry about it. It's very easy to worry about it and be scared when you think of it in terms of you're carrying the mind you have right now and the thoughts that you have right now with you into another form, because it sounds horrible. It's like a horrible transition into, now it's essentially everybody around you is dying. But yeah, when I'm dead, I can't worry about it. So I don't worry about it much, but I do definitely worry about other people.
Yeah. So you mentioned your grandmother dying. Have you had other people close to you die, and how how do you typically like react? How do you find yourself reacting to that?
Yeah, I've had a lot of close people die.
Okay.
Most of the significant people in my life have.
Oh,
wow. My grandpa, growing up when I was 9, he passed away in a very horrible way. It was very traumatizing.
In a very what way? I'm sorry.
Horrible. He was.
Right.
Yeah, it was awful. It was multiple strokes and heart attacks and a lot of just really awful things.
Yeah.
And I saw him in the hospital, and it was just horrible. And my stepfather, who I had a very odd relationship with throughout my childhood, it was kind of like he was kind of my enemy growing up. But then, when I became an adult, I kind of befriended him again and got close to him again. But he had cancer and he died. He was 54. And God, I can't remember, like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And that was weird, very hard.
yeah.
Because
It's funny you say weird, because that's my experience too. Like when my dad died, like weird is probably the best possible descriptor for that situation. You know what I mean? Like you just don't know how to react, and there's a lot of weird emotions you have, and you feel guilty and sad and mad and angry and frustrated all at once. It's weird.
Yeah, no, for sure. It was very, very difficult, but I don't think I was dealing with it in any kind of appropriate way. It was kind of me just being really angry and feeling how unfair it was. Like, and there was also this, again, an unknown variable, like when he died and how he died, and the fact that I wasn't there when he died. I didn't see him die. He was just dead when we went to the hospital. He was dead in a bed. He didn't look like himself anymore, and it was just kind of like a total mindfuck. Like it was devastating, but also just like twisted my perception of death, because once again, it was another very significant male role model in my life who dies in a hospital, and all the negative things that are tied to that. But then a few years later, when my grandma passed away, it was quite the opposite, where I saw her die. I was with her in the room when she died, and it was totally fine. It wasn't scary. It wasn't frightening in any way. It was a relief. It wasn't scary. It just gave me closure with all the stuff that I experienced growing up with death, the scary aspects of it. And it kind of closed the book on that, and kind of helped me deal with the death of my stepfather. For sure. It was a gift. It really was. Like it's weird to say, but like her death was a gift. It was just like, here, like, you can see this, so you don't have to have all these, so the mystery is gone. Like,
right.
I don't know. It was in a lot of ways too, like that was before I started working on Meat Boy, and it was kind of another like, hey, wake up, you're only alive for so long. You better try harder. Like, I want to see where my limitations lie. And she was kind of the person who was always pushing me in that direction. And yeah, in a lot of ways, I feel like after she passed on, that it kind of filled me up with this energy to just take it as far as I can take it.
Yeah.
And just like, kind of like prove her right. Because she was always the person who believed in me, and no matter what weird stuff that I did.
Yeah.
And again, like she's a devout Catholic. But I was making weird stuff. I lived with her when I was making Dead Baby Dress Up and all these other really weird, mildly pornographic things. She saw them all.
Yeah.
She's an elderly woman. Like, she saw them all. She laughed when things were funny. She really, it was never. She never made me feel like an outcast. She made me feel like someone who has something more to give than other people, instead of something that someone who doesn't fit in. Because that's kind of like how I always felt.
Yeah.
I felt that way with everybody. I felt like, even to this day, I still feel like a big weirdo. I still feel like a complete outcast. Even in groups of my peers. Like, I feel like I don't share the same values. I don't like the same things. I don't know. But I was like that always. And And when you're a kid, you can really take that two different ways. And for the most part, everybody around you is telling you that you're wrong. And you feel like a loser. You feel like an outcast, and you feel like no one can relate to you at all. But I was lucky enough to have somebody who did, and who could tell me that, it's a perspective. Everything is a perspective. And you can look at yourself as a monster, or you can look at yourself as something special and unique.
Do you think of that way that she related to you as like because of her Catholic belief or in spite of it?
I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, I know that her religious beliefs were extremely important to her.
Yeah.
But they were very personal. And
okay.
And like she didn't talk about them. She didn't, she didn't talk about, like, I remember my wife asked her when she was on her deathbed many different times. This woman wouldn't die. Like she every week it was, oh, hospice is here and this is it. Got to get over here. And we'd spend all day there, and then she'd just wake back up, sit up in the bed, and start talking, and be like, "Oh, I'm fine. I'm going to get up and vacuum." And she'd literally recover for like half a year, and then it would happen again, and then it got to the point where I was like, "Oh yeah, sure, today's going to be the day." But my wife asked her, like, "Are you going to see Grandpa when you die?" And she's like, "No." I'm like, "Well, what do you mean?" She's like, I'm gonna stand at the hand of God next to him. That's what I'm going to do."
Wow.
And it's like, oh, and that's what she believed. I didn't know that. I didn't know that until it was asked. And I always thought that that's what she thought. I thought that she would see my grandpa and heaven.
Yeah.
They would be together and everything is fine. But no, she believed something very different. And I feel like there was an unspoken understanding that what she believed was what she believed. And it didn't necessarily apply to anybody but her. Even the people I remember going to church with her and her getting really mad at somebody who wouldn't shake my hand when we would give thanks and you guys aren't Catholic, but there's a part where you give peace to other people. You say peace be with you, and you give them a hug or shake their hand or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I dressed in black and I looked odd. So this guy in front of us in church.
Yeah.
Would refuse to shake my hand, and my grandma got so mad, and she told him off and how, like, this is the reason why people don't like Catholics and blah 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 and whatever else. And she kind of like explained how even in this church where we all supposedly believe the same thing, everybody believes everything way differently. Like, everybody's understanding of this religion, of these religions that certain people believe, they can all go by the same guidelines and believe the exact same stuff. But what they actually believe and the things that they value are so vastly different. Everybody is worshiping and believing and experiencing in a completely different way, and there's no actual overlap. And I think that she knew that. And I mean, she didn't even. My grandpa didn't go to church. Like, I don't remember them ever arguing about it or talking about it. It was just, I don't know. Yeah, my grandma and her spiritual side was very apparent, and everybody would tell you how spiritual she was. A lot of people would tell you that she was psychic and that she would have premonitions and all this stuff. Like, I viewed my grandmother as a mystic. She always felt like she knew more than anybody else and was just so in tune with people's feelings, and I don't know, a very special woman. But I think for her that it was what made her special, what had a lot to do with her spiritual beliefs, for sure.
So what would you say about, like, kind of your beliefs, or your, I guess, you would kind of, if you, like you said before, your kind of uncertainty, I guess, is about a lot of things. Does that motivate the way that does that motivate your game design philosophy, the way that you approach making art?
Yeah, I think it does, definitely. I think you could see the value of the unknown in my work very much. I value the unknown a lot. I think mystery is so important in life, it gives you something to search for. And I think in games I do the same. Like I try to keep things as mysterious and vast as possible. I try to connect things as deeply and elaborately as possible in every way, like not just in the gameplay sense, but also in a thematic sense or in a story sense, just overall. I try to intertwine as many things as possible and draw parallels as many ways as possible. I just try to put a lot of depth there for people to get lost in, and a lot of unknown to explore. Because I think that's so rewarding, because that's kind of what life is. You know, you're going through life and you're learning as you go and experiencing as you go and becoming enlightened as you go.
Yeah.
And I put that in everything I do, I think. I try to, at least.
Yeah. I certainly had that experience with Binding of Isaac. Like, to me, part of what was so great about that game was I don't know that I can have the same. I guess I had that experience again when I played the new version that just came out, Rebirth, to some extent. But the first time you play it, you certainly have, unless you're one of those people that gets online and reads all the wikis and figures out what all the power-ups do. But I loved how there was just all these insane items that you would find, and you had no clue what they would do. And it's just, it feels really oppressive, but at the same time very mysterious. And, some of them would piss me off, but I would go back because I wanted to,
Well, in a lot of ways, I think with Isaac, there's another big aspect of the game, which I think has a lot to do with the way I view the world and everything else, is I designed the game to where you have to deal with the hand that you're dealt.
Yeah.
And there are, of course, people who just like to restart the game if they don't like the hand that they're dealt. But I'm the kind of person that revels in that. Like I think experiencing each run with the hand that you're dealt, regardless of if it's good or bad, or the synergies are good or bad, there's still a lot of reward in that. And in a lot of ways, it shows you that when you're dealt a hand and you succeed, you feel much better about what's going on. And I think there's something to that as well.
I'm curious, so for me, Binding of Isaac feels not, I wouldn't say autobiographical is the way that I would put it, but it feels like you have created a character you deeply care about. You know what I mean? When you play that game, it feels like Isaac, certainly the player cares about Isaac, or at least I do.
Goal. And I take, when you're designing a protagonist or whatever in a game, and you want people to relate to the protagonist, how better than a completely defenseless, naked, crying child? There's so much wrapped in there. I purposefully rip the clothes off of this naked, completely exposed to every element. No guard whatsoever. You're a child, a completely innocent child whose only defense mechanism is emotion, his tears. And there's of course a play on holy water and that old stuff too. But at its core, you are the most helpless being you can fathom.
Yeah. So how much of you is in Isaac?
A lot of me is in Isaac, but also a lot of other people growing up and stuff. When I went in, I definitely was kind of writing from, my writing from my own experience very abstractly. Of course, I wasn't, abused in the way that he was, and I play up the abuse a lot and allude to some pretty horrible stuff. But the stuff I'm alluding to is all stuff that, it's kind of family stories of generations, of really messed up families that, and in some way I hold in my DNA. Anything connected to religion, and experiences, that were religiously based. A lot of unclean child type, yucky stuff.
Yeah.
That I mean, at its core, I really think when it came to how autobiographical the game was with me, was I was writing abstractly from the perspective of somebody who was really made to feel like a monster, because I didn't fit in. And it wasn't like I was, later in my teen years, I would, of course, go into religious debates with my father and that side of the family and stuff. But when I was really young, when I had no grasp on what religion was, other than the fact that I was a bad kid who liked bad things, and it made me feel like a bad kid. And I know that if I experienced that even on a small level and it wasn't that bad, that I can only imagine how other kids kind of feel. And again, there's a duality to it too, because if I didn't feel like an outcast, I don't think I would feel as entitled to this creativity that I have. Mm-hmm. Like I feel like in a lot of ways I was pushed more into it. Like I was pushed more within myself because I didn't fit into the world around me. So I had to look for other options, and the options that I found were all fictional. But those fictional options look really good on paper to other people.
Yeah.
And I can entertain people with that kind of experience.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious. I guess your dad's side of the family, are they still like really like hardcore?
Yeah.
Christian types?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say quite fanatical.
Yeah. So are they like? What was their? I'm curious of what their response was to Isaac.
My father really likes it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my father. It's interesting. So I don't interact with my father that much. Maybe once a year. He lives I think he lives out in the desert right now, but basically in LA, like Southern California. And he comes up here every once in a while to. Actually, I think he might be in town this week, but mostly see my sister and she has a kid, and I'll go out and eat with them or whatever else. And last time he came down, or 2 times before, I gave him a copy of Isaac, and I said, if this is a DRM free copy, so you can give it to whoever wants it and wants to play it. And he's like, okay. And next time I saw him, he said, yeah, that Isaac went over big at my church.
Wow.
He's like, yeah, the kids really love it. And I was like, I don't think that's that appropriate. I said, I don't know. Like, depending on how you look at it, it can be taken really, really negatively.
Yeah.
And he goes, no, it's all by the book. And it's like, he was like, no, it's all like a biblical story. And he installed it on all the computers, and they did like a teenage, teen kid lock-in. And the kids played it all night long, and they loved it. And that was the end of it. No one said anything about it. I don't know what the other McMillens think. Honestly, I don't know if they ever listen to this stuff or what. I have no idea. But
yeah, because my assumption was going to be that they played. It's fascinating to me, because my assumption was going to be that they played Isaac and were really concerned about you, or that it worried them or something. Yeah.
Strangely enough, for all the stuff I experienced with them, I never actually felt like they were too concerned about me.
Yeah.
Never got that sense of wondering if he's okay.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, yeah, because there's really 2 kind of camps in our circles of how to receive this game, which is, this is an attack on what the Bible and Christianity and what the Binding of Isaac, that story, is about. This is sort of like a anti-Christian screed. And the other is, this is a personal experience we can listen to and learn from, So obviously we would fall in that second camp, but it's, I don't know, it must have been a relief to have your dad kind of fall into, I guess, the second camp there.
I don't know if it was a relief as much. I love engaging my father in these conversations. My father doesn't believe in evolution. I don't even know if he believes in dinosaurs. But he I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting that there's that perspective that's there.
Yeah.
I mean, and to put all my cards on the table, I didn't actually make this as an attack on anybody. It was a personal experience. I was writing from my own personal perspective that I don't believe that anybody else completely shares, because they aren't inside here. Like this is and like I was saying before, imagery and themes are so entwined with each other in the game that it becomes this very self-referential personal thing that only I get on that level. Again, it doesn't matter if other people get it or not. Like, the game can be experienced for what it is. It can be experienced as just a strange game that's fun to play. And that's completely fine. It's never like I feel like everybody's missing my message or whatever else, because my message isn't much of a message as it is a conversation like we're having right now. Like, it's not I don't have any answers. I have nothing. I have only my experiences. And whatever I put out there for other people to play, they can jump in and, take what they want and go with what works with them or what feels relevant to them. And for my father, all he did was see a biblical story that's been rewritten. And that's great, because at its core, that's kind of what it was.
Yeah.
And hey, who am I to say? Like, art's very subjective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think there is a third camp, though, of, like, the way a Christian might respond to Binding of Isaac, which I actually think is probably, it sounds like this is where your dad falls, is that he just kind of played it like a game. Like, it's just a game. You know what I mean? Like, there's people who... And that's the kind of person that I think, like, gets on the wiki pages and, like, figures out what all the power-ups do, and, like, just tries to beat it and know what everything does in it.
I mean, I would say that less than 10% of people who play Isaac and are actually into the game think anything about the theme or the story or care about it in any way, shape, or form, and that is
which is interesting, because I feel like it's so, like, I mean, that's definitely what resonated with me about it. That's why it sticks out to me, because I think it kind of, like, I guess because I feel like I shouldn't say forces, but it definitely asks you to think about what's going on, because
constantly.
All these power-ups are very clearly tied to this abusive relationship that Isaac has with his mother. And so, it's interesting to me that people just game it out, without giving much thought to that.
Well, Drew, we were talking to a really thoughtful guy the other day who was like, I don't get this game. Like, can you guys, you guys talk about how deep it is, but I just don't understand it. And we were like, well, it's about this and this. And he was like, oh, I just realized I skipped the intro. Like, that was kind of the whole thing for him, was he had just missed the intro. He accidentally hit start or something and just missed what it was about, basically.
Yeah.
Which I thought was funny.
Yeah. The most fun I've been having with this game at this point, because as you might know, like, when designing Isaac, I never set out to make a game that anybody would care about. I didn't think anybody would play it. Like, I thought it was going to be a very niche, old school, like, it was Isaac is a lot like my old games. The Super Meat Boy is a pretty mainstream variation of my storytelling and game design. It's by far the most accessible game that I've ever designed. Isaac, on the other hand, was way the opposite, and not only in its very kind of hard to take themes and story, but also just the overall game design. It came out at a time where nobody played these roguelike games, and it was getting really negative reviews saying, like, why would I want to play a run where I lose all my items that I work for after I die? Like, it's too hard, it's too hardcore. And I remember trying and pleading with these people to be like, play it a few more times, because I did a lot of work here. Like, there's a lot going on, and, like, the more you play, the more it unfolds, and that was my design. But I knew that, like, there was this barrier of entry of, like, you've got to put some time in order to really get what I'm offering here from a design standpoint. So I was like, for sure, there is no way this is going to do well. Nobody's going to care. And in a lot of ways, I was designing it purposefully to not do well. I'd already seen success. In a lot of ways, it was pretty scary. And I didn't want to be, Indie Game the Movie, Edmund McMillen, indie darling, type person. I wanted people to see that I'm more than what they saw in this movie, and that I'm more than a one-dimensional person, and I want to put more out there. I want the darkness to push out a bit more, and I want to make something a little bit more abrasive and more like what I used to do. But what's hilarious now, and what I really enjoy, is the fact that really so many people, it's become, almost like, at this point with Rebirth out, there's like 4 million people who have been playing the game, not counting other platforms and whatever else. And people are just playing it, and they see it as a video game, and that's it. And what's hilarious, it's the same situation with Mario, where nobody ever questions the fact that Mario is is constantly referencing drugs, and it is a very obvious take on Alice in Wonderland, which was also referencing drugs. It is completely psychedelic, eating mushrooms, getting bigger, getting smaller, psychedelic experience, which was probably pretty apparent when it came out. But once it became a part of pop culture, nobody questioned the themes anymore. And I sometimes have to remind people that you are playing as a naked child, a bald naked child who's killing things with his tears, is running in fear of his mother. These general themes, of which on paper when I write it out look so dark and dreary, everybody just thinks it's this fun game, and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is fun. It's cool. It just shows you how,
That's incredible. That's really interesting. But that has to make you so that doesn't make you so agitated sometimes, or frustrated?
No.
Okay.
No.
That would annoy me.
It's just another, it's interesting. It's just another learning experience to see how people and just society in general, or a large group of people, take something and run with it, and how it changes over time. In a lot of ways you can tie it back to the Bible. It's a similar experience.
Yeah.
It's just how it works.
Yeah.
Since
you brought up the Bible, I did want to ask you what your actual opinion or take on that story, The Binding of Isaac, is. How you feel about it when you read it.
When I initially read this story, it seemed really hardcore.
Yeah.
But all Old Testament stuff was pretty hardcore. Back then,
it's true.
God was super vengeful and very jealous and more like a human. He didn't seem so godly then. He seemed to have more human emotions, and very vengeful and jealous, and which I kind of like. From a creative standpoint, writing that God is much more fun than later New Testament. Love everyone, everything's gonna be great type situation, aside from Revelations. But I thought it was interesting because, quite literally, the stories from the Bible interest me to juxtapose them with how they would be different if they happened now, and how if something, quite literally, if something that was written as fact, like a real thing that happened, if the Binding of Isaac, the story, really happened, and it really for sure happened, what if it happened again now? It happens often. People hear the voice of God telling them to do a lot of things, and they do these things, and these people are either killed or shipped off or whatever else, and there's just that in itself, is kind of my initial Binding of Isaac idea, where it's that's interesting. Because nobody in hell would believe if somebody came into one of your guys' churches and said, "No, I swear, God's speaking to me. I swear this, and he's telling me this," you'd say, "You are insane. You are insane. Yeah. You're a crazy person. Get this crazy person out of here." Especially if they're saying, "God's telling me to kill somebody."
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting on a really deep level when it comes to just the Bible in general and belief. And that's what I was taking a stab at.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, as we kind of close out here, do you, how do you feel about, obviously this is something you did with Isaac, we've already kind of talked about this, but how do you feel about religion in games, and what, do you feel like there's any good examples of some games that tackle like religion or spirituality in an interesting way?
I don't think so. I can't think of any. Nothing really.
I mean, Binding of Isaac certainly is one that sticks out in my mind because, like, I guess, and it's probably different for me playing it as a Christian, but it sort of forced me to deal with that story in kind of to confront the darkness that's in that story. It's a like you said, it's a dark story, and you kind of have to like process through that and think about it. But you can't think of any others that deal with that in an interesting way, or
no.
That's not the kind of game you wouldn't be drawn to that kind of game, I guess.
I don't. Yeah. I'm honestly not too drawn to stories in games because usually traditional storytelling in video games kind of sucks for me. I don't find it interesting at all. I usually skip cutscenes, like the guy that skipped the intro. I'd be him. I'd be that guy, and I'd probably be fun. It's like just on a surface level, let's have fun playing this weird game, which is fine. Obviously, I'd enjoy it. I designed to enjoy it, but I don't know. I mean, no, I can't say. I'm really interested in religion. Like, I think it's very interesting. I'm really interested in it creatively. And like, if I reword this question and I say like, well, what are some art forms and other things like religiously that have inspired me or that I really look towards, as interesting? I would say the works of Jack Chick are incredibly interesting. I think that guy.
Yeah.
I think that guy is a genius. And I really love his work. I think he's a great artist. I think he's an amazing artist, but he's also a questionable human being, like, on many levels. But I'm the kind of person that kind of really separates the art from the artist. And I think in a lot of ways, I think the way he writes about his interpretation of the Bible and his personal views on things come through in his writing and his work. And you kind of see this undercurrent of what he's worrying about. He kind of has this paranoia that everybody's out to get him, that he is an outcast. Like, in a lot of ways, he really writes like he's an outcast, and I don't know, it's so interesting. I collect his work. I have a lot of his stuff, and I've been trying my best to like finagle some sort of actual piece of art that he did that I could frame, because I would love to get that before he dies, because I'm sure he's going to pass away in the next 5 years. He's quite old.
So is he still like putting out new tracks? Okay.
Yep, wow. For sure. Some people think he's dead, and they think that the people are like he's done a bunch of tracks and that they're just putting it out for him.
Yeah.
I did get in contact with the secretary there, and she said that he's like 90, 95 or something, and that still working. And he's still doing like I have subscribed to their newsletter, and they have this thing called Battle Cry, which is not a great title for a religious extremist group.
Right.
He writes at the end. He always has like a message to everybody, and I believe it's him writing it. But yeah, he's still around. And he's still doing his tracks, and I'm still collecting them. I would cite him as like a major influence from a religious creative standpoint.
Yeah, that's interesting. Have you seen some people are making like a Jack Chick movie, like this Kickstarter project?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think I part of the Kickstarter.
Okay, yeah. I don't know if it's been made yet or not, but
there's a documentary about him that's been out for a while. It's mostly about his work and stuff. It's pretty funny. There are other people like me who aren't really religious, but really find his work really interesting, like collectors and stuff.
Yeah.
He actually made a track about that, about how it's bad if you're a collector.
Oh, of his stuff?
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love his work for sure. And everybody thinks I'm a huge weirdo. But
well, I would feel weird collecting them as a Christian, but that's another discussion. But I can understand why you find them fascinating for sure, because they are that, I guess, if anything. Thanks so much for being on the podcast with us, Edmund.
No problem. Thanks,
Edmund. This was
fun. For asking me questions that I'm not usually asked.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, you can follow Edmund on Twitter at what, Edmund?
Oh, who cares?
You don't care. Okay. Cool. Well, you can follow Rich on Twitter if you'd like to. If you'd like to follow Richard Clark, our managing editor at Steady at Living. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, you can follow me at DrewDixon82. If you enjoyed the podcast, please spread the word on Twitter, Facebook, and especially on iTunes by rating and reviewing us. Our podcast producer is Cray Allred. Go play Binding of Isaac if you haven't yet, and then don't send us hate mail if you're offended by it. Edmund, before we go, is there anything you're working on that you'd like to mention?
I'm currently taking a break. I'm taking a bit of a break. Have a lot of stressful situations as of late and a recent move. So I think I'm going to lay low for the holidays. But I'm working on a new Super Meat Boy with Tommy called Super Meat Boy Forever.
Nice.
And working on an expansion for Isaac, which will hopefully be out, midway through next year.
Yeah.
And working on some other really weird projects that will hopefully crash and burn in the way that I hoped that Isaac would.
Great. We'll definitely be keeping an eye out, particularly for those crashing and burning ones. Those are the ones I'm most excited about. So, well, thanks again, and we'll see you guys.
Thank you.